Hi, my name is Robert Peterson, and my presentation is about punishment, particularly the conditions surrounding punishment and what defines punishment. So, an overview of this is what is punishment? That's difficult to say. It changes through cultures, laws. It is a dynamic facet of law. And that is primarily what this is trying to establish, is when is punishment to be identified as enough? Like, where do people stop? So this amendment is related to the 8th Amendment, and that's excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. And I'm inspired to research this more, not because of the 8th Amendment or because I have a curiosity with punishment particularly, but I was reading about the 13th Amendment before this, and the 13th Amendment speaks directly to how slavery is not permissible except, and this keyword except, this is me underlying except as punishment. Let's underline that in air quote, punishment, for being duly convicted of a crime. The phrasing is probably wrong, but is if you're convicted for a crime through a court, your punishment can be enslavement. That is, so it really speaks of antebellum, Reconstructionist, post-Civil War politics, and I find that really concerning. I originally wanted to base my paper upon the 13th Amendment, but it found that since punishment is more primary factor to establishing this context, as a key word that relates both amendments, that it is more prescient to look into the 8th Amendment, as the 8th Amendment is more expansive. It is not as bottlenecking into slavery, because if I explore slavery, I have to think of punishment is much more varied, and if a person defines punishment, a person can undercut slavery, is my thinking. So that's my value of this. So a source that I'm assessing is Prisons No Longer Places for Punishment by the UK Telegraph 2017. I'm choosing this source as it mirrors a quote I really enjoyed by Clayton Ruby, and I'm going to go ahead and read that quote now and then speak about this paper and try to relate to you how these intertwine. So Clayton Ruby said in 2009, anyone who can hire a good psychiatrist and a good lawyer will never be executed. Is it fair to take the lives of those who are poor because they are poor? And this is speaking to capital punishment, and is usually mostly related to prison systems, as those are places where capital punishment is carried out or allowed. And that's really saying so much how punishment affects people differently. It's disproportionately affecting people based upon financial access generally, or access period. It's not necessarily, I'm sure there's a wonderful psychiatrist out there who will help you out, but well, so what I really take away from Clayton Ruby and the UK Telegraph, not only is that this is an idea that this mirror, that there's these hidden assumptions of how people define punishments and the causes of it. So Clayton, to really elaborate, Clayton Ruby says that capital punishment is like saying that the person will not change, is incapable of changing, and that the conditions relating to this person being where they are not distinctly important enough to spare this person from capital punishment. And that carries over to prisons no longer being places for punishment by the UK Telegraph in 2017, as the UK Telegraph primarily focuses on defining punishment. And there's a lot of conflict, politically speaking, that's being reported through this article about defining punishment and what is punishment and why is punishment. A lot of people think that if you go to prison, that's not punishment enough. You should suffer more because you're in prison. You should have like XYZ taken away from you and then have XYZ inflicted upon you. So it's a punishment upon a punishment, and creates a cycle of punishment because then the person leaves. And really, to not make this about the prison industrial complex so much so as about punishment, because slavery does not necessarily equate to being in jail, and punishment does not necessarily equate to a sentencing of a court-appointed system of jail or jailing, is that punishment is a very broad notion, and to really explore why people have relations that they have is to understand why is it defined as it is and how to define it more appropriately, and when is punishment vengeful versus when is punishment compassionate. Like the title itself, prisons no longer places for punishment. The punishment is going to prison, right? So now let's not make prison the punishment. Let's make it sort of an aid to you instead of a revolving door. And this is seen happening in places such as Norway with the lowest return rate or the least frequent revolving door. And then applying this notion of punishment, this is the abstract, is applying that notion of punishment to less formal means, such as courts and so on, such as like capital punishment for drug addicts is like saying drug addicts, like Duterte of the Philippines, like drug addicts will not change, or their life is void, or so on and so forth, is very, there's not a lot of evidence showcasing that this deters activities. So it's really clear and prescient to me and the source, and I find the source valuable for that it's prescient to me as well, that developing more compassionate means of punishment are really imperative. So my problems and progress with this is difficult. You know, these aren't things that people want to see. These undercut a lot of notions of culture. It's defining punishment. It really involves going through a lot of people's emotions and baggage and things like that. And that's really, I feel, difficult personally, because it's probably not appropriate for a lot of etiquette. Really, my solutions, I think, are we need to just define punishment and really be concise about what we expect from punishment and why we are punishing people and the implications of it. So my name is Robert Peterson. This presentation is about punishment and the implications of punishment. Thank you.